I'm John Gacey. I'm from Waterloo, Iowa.
And you're a man of some authority here. What is your title?
Well, I'm first cook in the kitchen, and I run the morning meal and the afternoon meal in the kitchen.
John, how long have you been here?
I've been here now a year and about 2 weeks.
Well, how about Christmas time? You do anything special for the guys? What are you planning for old Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, for example?
Well, Christmas Eve, the food service department, under the direction of Mr. John Breimer, will prepare stockings that we hand out. Well, actually, they're paper bags that'll have fruit, an apple and an orange, and a box of Bridge Mix candy. Mm-hmm. And this is all from the staff here. They donate this. Then in the cell houses at night on Christmas Eve, we will serve cookies and hot chocolate to the men in the cell houses. This is around 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. Then come Christmas Day, we serve a regular traditional Christmas dinner.
Now tell us about that. What's that going to be?
This is quite a meal. This will be roast whole turkey. We use 25 whole turkeys that are approximately 540 pounds of turkey that we fix. We start preparing this on the day before. This is all prepared by inmates, and there's 9 cooks under my direction and under the supervision of several supervisors that are assigned to the food area. Along with that, we'll make up 10 bake pans, large baking pans of oyster dressing. We use 8 gallons of oyster in that. And we use the giblets and everything so it doesn't go to waste. We make a nice giblet gravy. We'll have candied sweet potatoes and use about 36 gallons of that. And so that they have a choice of potato, we make up 250 pounds of mashed potatoes.
Truth to suburban contractor John Gacey's rambling statements to police last week is becoming more and more evident with each passing day. 6 more bodies unearthed from the basement crawl space of Gacey's Norwood Park Township home today, bringing to 15 the number found there since Friday. Des Plaines and Cook County Sheriff's Police investigators arrived first thing this morning to resume their search. The big white wagon, which has been used to transport bodies from the northwest suburb to the morgue, Fishbein Institute, pulled up early today and stood waiting outside the house while more digging went on inside. Also on the scene, crowds of onlookers, the curious, many of whom have stood to death watch for days. By late today, just about all the hollow spaces in the house had been opened up for the searchers, floorboards and ceiling panels pried loose and carted out to the huge bin just outside the front door. Most of the attention has been centered on the 30-inch dirt crawl space, similar to one we photographed in a house near Gacey's. This is where 12 of the 13 bodies were buried. Searchers are being hindered by water, which keeps filling in their holes, a water problem which Gacey had used as an excuse to have trenches dug in the crawl space. Employees who did the actual digging said they thought drainage tiles were to be buried, not bodies.
We did make the recovery of 6 additional bodies, which brings our count up to 15 at this point in time. 3 of the bodies that have what we would consider strangulation cords or ligatures around their necks.
Now, all these bodies appear to be in the same state of decomposition.
That's something you'd have to ask the doctor. He's eminently qualified than I am.
I would say yes.
How long we've been in?
About 15 minutes ago, the sight of familiar body bags being carried from that house today, 6 more in all, bringing the total to 15 found since Friday. Those officers not at the scene are gathering dental records and x-rays of teenage boys missing from the Chicago area since 1974. They're also combing payroll information from Gacey's contracting business and contacting former employees to make sure they're all alive. So far, all are. Adding to our report yesterday that other than the former employees, many victims may have been male prostitutes or homosexuals who came to Gacey's house willingly. Sources tell me today that Gacey used to cruise Bughouse Square, the homosexual pickup point between Clark and Dearborn on Chicago's near north side, as well as several other northwest side bars. For that and other reasons, authorities believe most of the victims came from Chicago, where Harold Thomas, commander of the Police Department Youth Division, today defended the department's record in missing persons cases, telling our Vivian Rosenberg Chicago police knew John Gacey quite well.
When we in the Chicago Police Department first became aware of this gentleman 2 years ago, we put him under surveillance for over 30-some days, and we could never we never established probable cause that he was committing an offense. We never saw him take a young person into his automobile. Young persons left his home, but these were overage youngsters and young adults.
On another story, more than 1,000 inmates in Stateville Prison are on death.
Facts about John Wayne Gacey you may or may not know. He unalived 33 people, but some estimate that it's closer to 45, and sadly some of these victims have still not been identified, leaving you to wonder if there's still some families out there who were just wondering where their child is. Gacey himself would say that at age 5 he was SA'd by a 15-year-old neighbor, and then at age 8 by a contractor working on a house nearby. Some of his victims' bodies spent so long in the basement that their bones would fuse together, and after it was all found, they would have to be separated. He started off stealing his mom's undies, and then he'd bury them under the house, and she'd find out about it, and things would stop, at least as far as she knew. But then he would soon go over to his neighbors, steal their undies off the clotheslines, and then bury them under the house too. In 1971, he started his own construction company, and he'd use this as a way to scout out potential victims. In his early 20s, while working for a mortuary, he would admit to touching a boy's corpse.
Today we are going to cover the secret life of the serial killer or killer clown John Wayne Gacey. Gacey was born in Chicago, Illinois on March 17, 1942. Gacey was the middle child to John Stanley Gacey and Marion Robinson and had 2 sisters. Gacey was close to his mother and 2 sisters, but had a really difficult relationship with his father, whom was physically abusive and an alcoholic. His father was known to call him sissy, dumb, and stupid. Gacey had a really hard time living up to his father's standards because he was constantly comparing him to his other 2 siblings. In September 1964, Gacey married his co-worker, Marlon Myers, after 6 months of dating. Marlon's father owned 3 KFC restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa, and asked Gacey to manage them. The twisted double life of Gacey started around August 1967 when he lured 15-year-old Donald Voorhees into his basement. His method was through alcohol and the promise to watch sexual explicit films. Go to part 2.
John, how about Tim McCoy, the last one of the 5 that you say you had personal knowledge of?
Tim McCoy, even though he's the last one, he's the first one.
He's the first one, actually.
Right.
The first of the 33.
Tim McCoy was the first one, and Tim McCoy's name wasn't put on him until 1988. Prior to that, he was known as Unknown Number 9, and he was buried by me in the crawl space. That's the only knowledge that I have of it.
What was the circumstance?
After stating, "That's the only knowledge I have of it," John Wayne Gacey shows contempt. Why does he show contempt here? Is it self-contempt? Perhaps John feels some sort of shame or guilt. Or is this contempt directed at the interviewer? John Wayne Gacey says, "That's the only knowledge I have of it." People that are deceptive will seemingly become very forgetful. Since the memory is a hard thing to attack, it can be an easy cop-out for someone that is less than truthful to claim that they don't remember.
That's the only knowledge that I have of it.
What was the circumstances of that?
He was killed in the house in self-defense.
And who killed him then?
I stabbed him.
Yeah, and it was an issue of self-defense. Why was he in the process of assaulting you, or what?
He was coming at me with a knife. I just took the knife away and twisted it in his hand, and that's what killed him.
John Wayne Gacey shows a lip retraction here. But just by looking at this image, it could be mistaken for anger. By taking in the context here, John does not seem to be angry. So what is the meaning of a lip retraction? It could mean that John is withholding information. It could also mean that he is very distressed in this moment.
So at that point, you yourself did bury him then in the crawl space.
Right, and if you notice, he's under concrete.
Did you bury any of the others in the crawl space?
No, I had nothing. I had no knowledge of them.
Yeah. Well, why is it that your first one is there, and then 20 some others are buried down there as well? Did somebody know that you had done this with the first one, giving them an idea?
More than likely, when drinking and getting high with the others, yeah.
Admitting it to them. So you feel others then followed your suit in using this as a burial ground?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
It's hard to say if in fact this is a hand shrug, or John was just getting ready to say something more. The video was cut off. What is the meaning of a hand shrug? Like a one-sided shoulder shrug, this could indicate that he is not confident in his previous statement.
Infamous serial killer John Wayne Gacey is the subject of a new movie. That was a small clip from the trailer you just saw there. He is one of the most notorious serial killers in U.S. history, murdering at least 33 young men and boys. Gacey committed these murders in his Chicago area home, luring victims with the promise of construction work or under the pretext of demonstrating magic tricks. He then sexually assaulted and tortured them before killing them, burying most of them in the crawl space of his house or on his property. Known as the Killer Clown for his public performances as a clown, he was arrested in 1979 and was convicted of 33 murders the following year. Gacey was executed in 1994. And now, 30 years after Gacey's execution, the attorney who represented him is taking a look back on her countless hours of detailed conversations in a new book titled Killing Time with John Wayne Gacey. She talks about her efforts to try to get him off death row and whether there are more victims. Here now, the author of that book who represented John Wayne Gacey, Karen Conti. Karen, thank you for being here tonight.
Good evening, Natasha.
First of all, Karen, I think a lot of people must wonder, how did you do it? Knowing the horrifying things that this man did, why spend so many years fighting for him, spending countless hours gaining his trust in conversation? A lot of people consider this man close to evil. Do you agree with that?
Well, I agree that what John Wayne Gacey did was vile and evil and awful. And if there's anyone who deserves the death penalty, it would be someone like John Gacey. I don't believe in the death penalty. I never did, and I never will. And I took on this representation not to get him out of prison, but just to save his life. And listen, when you make these arguments against the death penalty, you're not just advocating for your client. You're advocating for the other people on death row who may be next, who may have actual innocence arguments, racist arguments, and arguments of poor counsel. So I was really standing up for the cause in addition to standing up for Gacey himself.
How did it feel to sit across from him? I mean, did it feel like you were looking into the face of pure evil, all these hours of conversations you logged with him?
Absolutely, positively not. Sitting with John Gacey was like sitting with your favorite uncle or a bus driver or somebody who you knew and saw every day. He did not appear evil. He was glib. He was humorous. He was intelligent, and he was engaging. And that's how he got away with all these murders. Had he been evil, had he acted in a bizarre fashion, he might have been one and done. But this is how he got away with murder.
Karen, do you have reason to believe that there were other victims of Gacey beyond the 33 young men and boys?
I absolutely do. I'd be shocked if there weren't. And Gacey was in construction, as you said, and he traveled extensively to rural areas all across the country. I saw his business records, and there's no question that he would have had better opportunities to abduct young boys in these areas where he wasn't known and that had fewer populations. So I absolutely believe that, and we may never know because didn't have a system back then to connect missing boys and bodies that were found.
Did you ever ask him? Did he ever say anything that gave you a reason to believe that?
Not really. He was in denial. He was a liar. He was a manipulator. He initially confessed to the crimes to another lawyer, but then he said he didn't do it. So you really couldn't believe anything he said. You just had to listen between the lines, and sometimes you could come up with some idea that what he was saying was actually the truth. But other than that, he never actually said that.
Okay, I appreciate that. If investigators were wondering where they should look for any additional victims, where would you point them to?
Well, his business records spell out very clearly, kept meticulous records, and they were up in the Pacific Northwest. There were some in Florida. There were jobs up in Wisconsin. So my guess would be that would be the way to trace it. But again, we didn't have a way of tracking missing boys and bodies being found. So it would take a lot of sleuthing to go back all these years and try to connect the dots.
Okay. Author of Killing Time with John Wayne Gacey, Karen Conti, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha.
What is that awful smell?
I'm not sure. I don't even know what you're talking about.
It's making me nauseous. How can you stand it?
The house wasn't built on a slab. It was dirt underneath it, and if you don't cover that, it smells. My mom didn't have any clue that it had a smell.
John, have you tried to figure out where the stench is coming from?
Oh, that. Yeah, I looked into that.
When I asked him about the smell, he said it was coming from the earth underneath. There was a crawl space under the house. Very small opening to get down, and there was a ladder that went down. Wasn't very deep. That was just where the odor was coming from.
I learned the first time it rained that this ground gets wet under there, and the crawl space puts out a musty odor. There was always a musty odor in that house.
And this just clicked when I heard his statement. I remember him saying in Cook County Jail, I should have cemented the crawl space. I don't know why I didn't cement the crawl space. And I looked at him and I said, what would that have solved? And he didn't answer me.